I would now like to introduce this morning's keynote speaker, Dean Dayna Cunningham, who truly represents Tufts' commitment to civic and global engagement. Dayna Cunningham has devoted her career to promoting civic participation, building community partnerships, and advocating for underrepresented communities. She joined Tufts in 2021 as the new Pierre and Pamela Amidyar Dean of the Jonathan M. Tisch College of Civic Life. Before leading Tisch College, Dean Cunningham was the founder of CoLab at the MIT, and before that was a civic rights lawyer by training, working years with the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund across many states in the South. She also served as Associate Director of the Rockefeller Foundation and Program Director of the Elias Project at MIT, a collaboration of government, businesses, and NGOs to create initiatives that supported economic, social, and environmental sustainability. She has an undergraduate degree from Harvard and Radcliffe Colleges, a JD from NYU School of Law, and an MBA from MIT's Sloan School of Management, and a PhD from Harvard University. I'm jealous. She's got more degrees than I do. Please welcome Dean Cunningham. Thank you.
Wow, I just earned a new degree up here. I'm so excited. Welcome to Tufts. We're so excited to see you here after all these 2 years, long years of being closed in. I'm Dayna Cunningham, and I'm so proud to be the Dean of the Tisch College of Civic Life. Thank you, President Monaco. On this, your final Parents and Family Weekend as president, thank you for so thoughtfully leading this campus through so many challenges and opportunities, for prioritizing the civic mission of Tufts, and for welcoming me into the Tufts family. Many thanks also to Lisa and Tim and the entire Parents Council, to Marianne and the special events team, and to everyone who had a hand in organizing this weekend. I also want to thank each and every one of you, the parents, grandparents, family members, and supporters, for sharing your students with us here at Tufts. As a parent and as a dean, I see you and I hear you. I want you to know that every one of us feels a personal responsibility both to educate your student and to care for them, for the whole of them. In the 15 months that I've been the dean, it's so clear to me that Tufts is a special place. It's a place that sees the contribution and potential of every student. It is a place where every student belongs. It is also a place that embodies a civic mission to attend to the civic responsibility that we all share. This mission, this civic identity of Tufts, could not be more important than it is today. The challenges we face are sharp and clear, as you may not have heard because the video was kind of muffled, but that was a panel of Tufts experts talking about the dangers and the risks to democracy right now. The coup attempt on January 6th, our electoral systems under attack, voting rights systematically dismantled, disinformation and misinformation, rigid partisanship, decaying public discourse. I won't go on. All of this while the challenges to nation and planet, climate change, vast inequalities, racial and ethnic divides, are becoming more severe. The stakes are incredibly high, And this explains why so many Americans across the political spectrum are worried. Last month, a national Quinnipiac poll found that 67% of American adults believe the country's democracy is in danger of collapse. Not at risk, but in danger of collapse. That view is shared equally among Democrats and Republicans. The attacks are directed not only at electoral systems, but also at libraries, public schools, colleges, and universities, foundational U.S. institutions. And the U.S. is not alone. Around the world, from Italy to Brazil to Russia, and of course, Ukraine, a dynamic struggle is unfolding to uphold democratic norms and practices against authoritarianism. This all sounds quite bleak, and yet I would say, because so much is at stake, because there is so much to fight for, it has never been a better time to be a citizen. Now is the time to stand for democracy, and your students are in precisely the right place at this time to be part of the change that must come. Tufts University has, in its core DNA, an unparalleled ethic and commitment to cultivating citizenship. It seeks to embed the values and skills of civic engagement into all corners of a transformative, world-class education. This commitment began with the founding of the school. So a little history lesson. Tufts founder, Hosea Ballou, was a radical for his time. In 1847, at the Universalists' General Convention, he laid out a vision for the abolition of slavery, the suppression of intemperance, the amelioration of punishments and prisons around the world. He warned that agitation for these causes was not a little temporary eddy of the waters in our own narrow creeks. It is a springtide that is coming in upon us from the broad, illimitable oceans. Welcome it or deprecate it, it is coming. Ballou also proposed establishing a university to cultivate higher principles to bear on the fight for these reforms. Tufts was chartered in 1852. Its first buildings were erected on land donated by Charles Tufts. When asked what he planned to do with that bleak hill over there in Medford, Tufts replied, "I will put a light on it." At the time, the nearest house to the Tufts campus was the Stearns Mansion. George Stearns was among the Secret Six who helped finance John Brown's 1859 abolitionist rebellion at Harper's Ferry. The Stearns' home served as a way station for the Underground Railroad. To be sure, this lofty origin story is not without its failings. The land donated by Charles Tufts was unceded Wampanoag and Massachusetts tribe territory, and later was part of the Ten Hills Plantation, a slaveholding estate. Tufts was exclusively white and male when it was founded. The first black graduate of Tufts College was Forrester Blanchard Washington, who graduated in 1909 and eventually served in FDR's cabinet, black cabinet. Women were admitted in 1892. Then in 1910 were matriculated to the Jackson College, which merged back into Tufts as a coeducational institution in 1980. The struggle for democracy is always complex and dynamic. Alongside these failings, the progressive spirit of the Universalist founders was reflected in its 1896 decision to name an award for Wendell Phillips. Wendell Phillips was a Boston Brahmin with views that were radical and remarkably egalitarian for his time, and perhaps even for ours. He was a leading 19th century abolitionist, a forceful advocate for Native American rights and an early agitator for women's suffrage and workers' rights. He was also a stunning orator and a fierce critic of institutions. He famously said, "Governments exist to protect the rights of minorities. The loved and the rich need no protection. They have many friends and few enemies. All revolutions," Phillips said, "come from below." Today, the light on the hill burns bright in the spirit of Hosea Ballou, Wendell Phillips, and others who followed in their footsteps. And now, Tufts' commitment to cultivating citizenship on our campus and in the world has new urgency. While critically important, civic engagement and public service are only the beginning of what is needed now. Our students must be prepared to modernize and strengthen our beleaguered institutions, and to do that in the context of a country and a world that is becoming more diverse each day. Let me say that another way. We must prepare our students now to be leaders in a world with a kind of complexity, diversity, risk, and opportunity that previous generations have never known. This is exciting and engaging work. It is important work, work that your students are part of and in many ways already leading. Much of it is done through Tisch College. The mission of Tisch is directly rooted in the premises of democracy and inclusion, that every individual has a role to play in the governance of their society, that all voices should be heard, and that means confronting histories of racial, ethnic, and economic marginality that have excluded and continue to exclude some. That citizens' collective agency can drive governments to be more just, inclusive, productive, and accountable to human and planetary well-being. At Tisch College, we study and promote civic and political engagement of young people at Tufts, in our communities, and in our democracy. We develop and promote innovative forms of representation that increase democratic inclusion in the U.S., and then we bring that work back to our students. Through our co-curricular programs such as Tisch Summer Fellows or the Tisch Scholars Program, students work with communities domestically and globally to explore and address emerging challenges in civic life. A newcomer to Tisch, the Institute for Global Leadership puts students in the field around the world to conduct immersive, student-generated research projects on emerging global issues, often before the issues hit the headlines. And importantly, our innovative civic studies major provides the academic underpinnings to connect learning in the classroom to learning in communities. Tisch is the only higher education institution in the country dedicated solely to the work of building, defending, and strengthening democracy. And it makes Tufts unique among American universities. Our focus now, developed with President Monaco's leadership, our North Star is building robust, inclusive democracy for an increasingly multiracial society. Soon in the U.S., there will be no single ethnic or racial majority, and we must learn how to govern ourselves with vastly more deliberation and inclusion. Our students, your children, are already living in this diverse future. And we here at Tufts, through Tisch programming and around the campus, are cultivating the leadership and citizenship skills they will need. Learning from the experiences of people who are very different from themselves and collaborating effectively with them across social and geographic divides. Developing the methods, tools, and imagination to craft solutions for domestic and global challenges for which past solutions cannot be a guide. Doing all of this with curiosity, exploring the future as it is emerging. A core competency of all of this is empathy and the ability to listen generously to others. In collaboration with all of the other schools on all of Tufts' campuses, Tisch is working to build these skills and competencies among your students and tracking student learning as we go. At Tisch, here is the key question that frames a civic life in service to democracy. What should we do? This is the title of a new book by Tisch's own Peter Levine, academic dean. Every word of that question is essential. What? We must make hard choices that may exclude some or bring hardship to others or create unearned advantages. When faced with a challenge, we must decide. Should. Should implies some choices are better than others, more just, more fair, more equitable, more rigorous. It's values-based decision-making. We. This is not an individual thing, this building of community. We are doing it together. Do. Do implies action, not merely pondering theoretical choices. We're making sometimes harrowing decisions with consequences in the world, and somehow we must make them as judiciously as possible together. What should we do? What is to be done for the greater good? Guided by a strong moral compass, we need to choose a course of action together. Our young people will inherit the dilemmas of climate change, global inequality, global pandemics, and more. It will take unprecedented cooperation and goodwill, both at home and globally, to overcome these challenges. Civil society, which at the end of the day is about people-to-people relationships, is where the spirit of cooperation is built or fails. Our task is to prepare young people, our students, your students, to build the robust and inclusive civil society that can sustain these relationships, that can support cooperation and uphold democracy. We can't tell them what to think. We can't tell them what to do. We can't tell them who to vote for or who to be. But we can challenge them to learn to ask together as a community, what should we do? Whether they're studying biomedical engineering or international relations or computer science or music, at this great university, we will help them build the foundation they need to take action in the world, because we know that people who join with others to create the world in which they live are much better off than those who live in a world of others' creation. I'll close with this. In these times, it's really easy to feel pessimistic. I'm an African American, and in my civil rights practice, the experiences of my family, deep in my heart and in my bones, I have understood the ugly shortcomings of our democratic institutions, how they've excluded and belittled and ignored Black and brown, indigenous and Asian peoples, but also poor whites who have not had a say. But as an African American, I also deeply understand what was promised in our founding democratic institutions and the critical importance of insisting that those promises be fulfilled. General George Marshall once said, "The soldier's heart, the soldier's spirit, the soldier's soul are everything. Unless the soldier's soul sustains him, he cannot be relied on, and he will fail himself and his country in the end." Let me paraphrase the great General Marshall and say right now we are at a crossroads for democracy here and around the world. Today, our task together is to sustain the citizen's heart the citizen's spirit, and the citizen's soul, because in the end, that is everything. Thank you. I forgot, I'm also here to answer questions. Questions? Yeah. Hi, Lloyd.
Hi, Dayna.
My friend here, he's not a plant, honest.
No, but I have a serious question, which is, to what extent does the curriculum or the efforts emphasize the many metrics of our life today in the world that are better than they've ever been, at the same time as we struggle with some existential issues that threaten our democracy?
That's really a great question. And so I want to sort of answer that I want to say that we are always in our programming looking at multiple dimensions of democratic experience. And one of the things that I am most excited about is the ways in which we are starting to use art as a form of engagement around these questions. And the reason I say that in response to your question is because it actually gets to General Marshall's quote, that the soul and the spirit must be fed. And for us, one of the really important ways to do that is through aesthetic expression, through the great genius of art that enables people to express joy and concern, despair and hope at the same time. And so Tisch has started turning its lobby into what we call a space for arts activation. A space where, and I also want to say that we also want full expression and a space where people can feel safe and brave to explore questions that are complicated, that may impinge on other people's comfort, but that enable kind of an honesty and a heart connection between people. So we are always looking at metrics around increased participation, innovative ways to get people more engaged in democratic practices. Young people, I keep saying we just have to hold on long enough for them to take over. We're going to be in so much better hands soon, yeah? So what I'm saying to you is we have metrics. We can tell you the states where young people's votes are really making a difference. We can tell you where young people are really being mobilized. We can tell you about new systems of representation that actually support and sustain representation and engagement across social divides. But at the end of the day, I think we also have to nurture the spirit and the soul. And for me, that is a question of creativity and aesthetics and expression that enable people to see kind of the deeper hope and joy that's possible.
Dean Cunningham, can you mention where Tisch is on campus so parents have a sense of how
Sure.
it's sort of in the middle?
So Tisch is on Packard Ave. It is right next to Ballou Hall, the famous Hosea Ballou Hall. And it's the building with Jumbo in front of it. So you can always find Tisch by looking for Jumbo.
Hey, good morning. I'm Michael Haynes. I'm a 96 graduate, and now I'm a freshman, so thank you for having us. You mentioned political divisiveness in some of your remarks, and I'm not quite sure how to formulate this as a question, but on the one hand, I think divisiveness is one of the biggest civic issues of our time. And on the other, as much as you can teach from Tufts about that, it's also one of the, one side of the political divide might define it as one of the elite liberal institutions
Yes.
that are at the crux of the issue. So I wonder how you address that divisiveness in what you're teaching these students.
So Tisch has another new center called the Generous Listening and Dialogue Center. And our goal is to teach students to cultivate a set of skills that enable them to listen empathically. Yeah, and so we're not kind of substantively taking on a liberal elite agenda or a conservative agenda. What we're saying is there are ways to learn how to listen to people that enable you to find common ground. And I think, and it has to do with quieting yourself and listening to yourself, listening to others with an open heart, with a heart that is ready for connection. And, in the face of these vexing problems in front of us, the idea of an open heart may seem quaint. But actually, I believe at the end of the day, it's all we have. We have ourselves, we have our hearts, and we have the possibility that we can find humanity in other people. And through finding that humanity, we can find solutions. I heard recently there was data that showed that COVID outcomes were much better in communities that had stronger civic infrastructure. And on one level, it's like, duh. On another level, so what builds, what creates, what upholds, what sustains strong civic infrastructure? And I think it is bonds between people, and I actually think that begins with the heart.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Seiden. I'm not a plant, but I happen to be fortunate enough to be on the Tisch Board of Advisors, and it's awesome. You should have tell your freshmen to look into the classes. But I think you mentioned a little bit about youth voting, and I think given that we have elections coming up, if you could share a little bit about Tisch's work in youth voting, since Tisch is a leader, and you'll all see that in the newspapers. I think it'd be great to share that. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you for that, that soft pitch. I love it. And thank you for the reminder. So Tisch is the country's leading authority on the impact, the obstacles, and the best practices for youth engagement. We have 2 labs, Circle, which studies non-college youth engagement, and we can track the states where the youth vote actually changes election outcomes. And we also have a bunch of best practices around how to activate young people to engage through social media and elsewhere. We also have at Circle a program called Educating for American Democracy, which was a 3-year bipartisan effort to develop a curriculum. It's not a curriculum, it is an approach to curriculum for teachers from K through 12. And the beauty of this approach to curriculum is that it is question-based, it is inquiry-based, it is not requiring memorization of facts, but putting historical dilemmas in front of students as young as kindergartners and asking them, what would you do? What should you do? So it's really building active citizenship from a very early age. And then our other lab, the Institute for Democracy in Higher Education, focuses on college campuses, and it is engaged, it touches half the college students in the country through 1,200 campus partners around the country. And there we analyze anonymized college student voter data data, give it back to the universities to help them understand where their students fit with the national picture around voter engagement, college student voter engagement. And then we provide lessons and best practices so that campuses that are scoring low can bring themselves up. So both of these labs are really quite consequential in the country right now for advancing and supporting young people's engagement.
Hi, Maria Dalbert, daughter to a sophomore in the engineering program. And so I was curious if you could elaborate some of the ways that this TISH is sort of collaborating with the other areas to broaden the use of these kinds of skills and thought processes across the college.
So the first thing is all of our events, and we have a very active, robust speaker series, the Solomont Speaker Series, are open across the campus. And actually we have really very consequential speakers. We had, let's see, now I'm blocking out all the fantastic speakers we have. Where is Jen? We have had Stacey Abrams, we have had Nancy Pelosi, we had John Lewis, and so we have a very active, like, who is in the news is coming to Tisch to talk about issues of democracy, and that's open to everybody. And they're always very well subscribed, these events, online and in person. We've had an audience of about 30,000. But we also have staff across the health campuses and lots of collaborations with faculty in arts, sciences, and engineering. So we are both supporting research around civically engaged practices in their fields and for faculty and who are working with students. So in the engineering field, we were working with faculty who were creating mobile devices for health applications. And she was teaching a class, I forgot, somewhere, I believe, in the global south. I think it was in Africa, somewhere in Africa, taking students in the field and working with them to create these devices. And then in the biomedical, in the health area, we also have full-time staff and in athletics who are working directly with students to provide internships and service experiences so that they're getting hands-on experience with civil society, with working in community.
Hi. Well, first, I just want to say that I think you missed a degree, President Monaco. I think you have a PhD in communications because this has been one of the best learning experiences for me, and I imagine for many parents in this room. So my question may be something that everyone knows, but I'm just wondering if you can help me and others understand sort of how do we take this forward to our kids and say this is how you get involved if you're not in the class, right? If we can certainly tell them to go see speakers, but are there ways that they can engage with Tisch outside of the classroom with you?
Absolutely. So just so you know, we've been live streaming interviews from our programs team who are describing all of the different programs we have for student engagement, what we call co-curricular activities. And so we have Tisch Summer Fellows. So if you're not with us during the year, you can do a summer internship with us. And what is really beautiful about the Tisch Summer Fellows is that they are paid internships. So students who want to get involved in community work don't have to sacrifice economic advantage to kind of do God's work. You know what I mean? So that's really important. We have, and then we have a bunch of one-off courses in the civic studies major that if you want to dig deep on a particular area of kind of the theory of civic life and civil society, then you can do that. We have mentoring programs and all kinds of internship programs where students get to work in the field with our community partners, and we have a robust staffing of our community partners' capacity so that we are constantly developing relationships with organizations in the community who we sort of together co-create opportunities for our students to meaningfully be engaged. We have the Tisch Community Research Center, which actually pays community organizations to work with us on research questions that they bring to us. And then we deploy the students to help explore the research questions. So there's a ton of ways and on-ramps. We have, IGL, which is one of our newcomer organizations. IGL is a conglomeration of amazing student groups that are student-created and that develop seminars and different kinds of programs, but also international research trips where the students are deployed on the ground in places that they choose to explore research questions that they are interested in. And this is not, we do have a class connected to IGL, but these are research projects that the students themselves create, and they go into the field, supported by Tufts alums in the field, to explore questions of interest to them. So, really, the opportunities are endless, and I just urge you to point your students to our website to explore what they might be particularly interested in. The other thing I will say is that I hold office hours in the lobby of Tisch College, and I will tell you, I'm sick of being lonely. Students, it's like they don't want to approach the dean. Please tell your students, I'm really nice, I don't bite. I love talking to the students. My staff will tell you they have to yank me away from my next meeting when they come. So please tell your students that come to Barnum, right by the elephant, come see the dean. She is really anxious to talk to them.
Hi. I'm a proud parent of a junior here at Tufts, and we had an interesting dinner last night with some Tufts parents in which we were talking about the struggles that democracy is facing here in the U.S. today. I'm curious your opinion when you, and I'm not a historian, but when you look back at the struggles that democracy has faced in the history of our country, women's suffrage, the civil rights movement, and other struggles. Do you think that today's struggles that we're facing are more severe, equally severe, or less severe?
Yeah.
It's curious.
I get that question a lot. And let me say this. This country had a civil war. We are not in civil war. We actually are not in civil war. And I actually believe, I said I think it's never been a better time to be a citizen. I actually feel very optimistic. I believe that civil society now is activated and people are really paying attention to what democracy is and how important it is. Who knew what secretaries of state did? Who really cared about the Electoral College? Geeks, of course. But who cared about the fine machinations of our political process? And suddenly, we actually all know a lot more about it than we ever did. Black Lives Matter was the biggest multiracial demonstration in the nation's history. It was the biggest, and it was multiracial. I think these are all signs that people care about democracy, want to preserve it. I feel very optimistic. There are all kinds of signs that people are waking up, and it's scary to see the contention. That is scary, but there's also a dynamism, and that's why I say now is the time to be a citizen, because we can put our fingers on the scale to make a difference now that we have all this knowledge, now that we see what happens when people are in motion. We can really make a difference.
Hi, I'm the parent of a sophomore, and I really appreciate what you've been saying, and I want to build on what you were just talking about there. Thinking about climate change and inequality, democracy, and the ways in which all of these things are related, and the intersectionality around all of that. I'm sure that many people saw the word divest in chalk in front of the building as we walked in this morning. Yesterday as well, students who support climate change action protested in front of the administration building, as they do every Friday as part of worldwide Fridays for Future. And so there is a group of students here who very much want Tufts to divest. Tufts is divested in their direct investments with fossil fuels, but not in their indirect investments. I've been dismayed to hear that the students who've protested in front of the administration's building administrators often walk by apparently without making eye contact, which was very distressing to hear. I wonder, given Tish's investment and all the things you've talked about so eloquently today, I wonder if you could speak to how Tish might be involved in helping Tufts address climate change in a way that divests from these indirect investments and honors what students here are wanting for this university and also for their future. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So I have to say that Tish, in its programming, does not have a specific focus on environment. But it is one of the areas that we keep coming back to in, for example, our civic semester program, which last year was placed first-year students on the U.S.-Mexico border to look at issues of climate. And we collaborate with faculty who are working on climate issues. You are raising a really interesting and useful challenge that I think I need to bring back to our team, which is about the struggle for the environment, but it's also a bigger question about how we support students across the board in engaging productively with the administration, including us, around their demands. And so this is something that we are constantly thinking about, constantly working with our groups of students around, making themselves more effective. But I don't know that we've had a specific engagement with the environmental students, and it's a really good idea. And so get back to you on that.
On that, we need to wrap up but thank you so much. This was amazing.